Melissa, thank you for putting this all together. Really well done. 2020 and 2021, there have been a time where things have been changing for nearly all of our markets. We've been looking at the mediums we've been using, so cable, what's happened with that? Fiber, what's happened with that? POTS, what's happened with that? Wireless, telephones. These seem to all be converging and going through one place. They're calling it something smart, virtualization. What's it really mean? Well, it means taking everything and putting it somewhere else up in the cloud. So we've got some really good segues here today with where this data is going. I mean, the data centers, they're getting a lot more things to do with just the virtualization of everything. But this also started me to think, so what's going on with HFC? What's going on with wireless? But they're all coming together now. So fiber is going to the same place where the coax is going. The wireless is going through the fiber to the same place where the coax was going. The telephones are merging in. So all of a sudden, our networks are getting closer and closer and closer together. But with this convergence, there's also a lot of movement around. We've seen it in the UK. I mean, Virgin Media, VMO2. That's really changing everything. But it's not just here, it's around the world. Things are converging together, because you can now. Why not just throw, for example, let's take a satellite. What do we do with a satellite company like Sky? Oh, we merge it with someone else. Then they've got fiber and satellite, everything together. This is also changing the way we're looking at things. So I've actually got something I'd like you all to do. Have a think about where we could have a lecture meeting that would make sense in the next year and where we could have something more than this. We've done these events in various places, but let's step it up a level. Let's try and find somewhere where we could get everybody together. So it's also ideas of where people would like to be, what you'd like to see. There's enough of the exec here today, so just grab hold of one and tell us where you want to be. That was it from me. I'm going to be back a little bit later, so there's one thing I will ask. If you're staying for the AGM, could you make sure you're in here for about 5 to 10 to 5? Because I've got a little surprise. Okay? James, the day is yours.
Good start. Hear me okay? Cool. I've got the task of kind of facilitating today, so I'll be introducing our speakers and kind of handling the Q&A when we get to it. Just a few bits of housekeeping from me just before we kick off and I introduce our first speaker. So agenda point, you've kind of seen through what the day kind of looks like. We've got 2 speakers lined up for you this morning. Obviously lunch will be provided then and some refreshments midday. Further 2 speakers this afternoon. Final break, refreshments, and then a complimentary tour of the Motorcycle Museum. And then finally we finish the day with the AGM as Tony references. So the housekeeping bits before I introduce our first speaker. No fire drills planned today, which is always good news. If anything does go off, if it's genuine, I'll consider it. You'll see the green signs throughout the doors that you come through and also at the side. And the meeting point's just outside the front doors where you come in. So if we need to group out, you'll see the kind of green signs there. Toilets, if you haven't found them already, are back in the foyer to the left-hand side, just down the stairs, and then just off to your left. And obviously the refreshments you hopefully also found. They're back in the foyer again, this time to the right, and just downstairs, just down a level. Free Wi-Fi if you need it, just in case you do need to stay logged on or connected in way. You'll see some posters around the building, but there's a free hotspot called NCC Visitor if you do. From a questioning point of view, we're going to hear off each of the speakers and we'll have a short Q&A kind of after. Obviously, we're first time back together. We don't necessarily we haven't got the restrictions we have had the last couple of years, but we will just try and handle the questions kind of smartly as well. So we'll kind of cover that when we do, but might just get you to kind of stand out to the edge of so I don't have to walk through the crowds and stuff. But we'll have microphones and stuff just to capture those. All right, so far? Cool. So first speaker, I'm going to do a bit of an intro first into what I'll be speaking about. I've got a snippet of your bio as well, so it should be pretty cool. So first up, we can hear from John Booth, Carbon3IT, data centers efficiency consultant. So John Booth is going to talk to us or flesh out the details arising from the SCTE long read from May's 21 edition. of the Broadband Journal regarding data centre sustainability, covering some background, sustainability, data centres, some guidance, the current and future reporting requirements, and then the size and complexity of the task ahead. Quick bio for John. So John Booth is a well-known figure in the EU data centre circles, primarily for his role as reviewer for the EU Code of Conduct for Data Centres Energy Efficiency Programme, and he's worked with the Certified Energy Efficiency Data Centre Award and Data Centre Alliance Certification. There's a lot of data centre in this bio, apologies. He's also the chair of the Data Centre Alliance, Energy Efficiency, and member of the Sustainability Steering Group, shaping the DCA's policy on these topics, as well as providing support to the DCA in other steering groups and the Alliance's wider activities. He's also the vice chair of BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, Green IT Specialist Group. He runs his own green IT consultancy, Carbon3IT Limited, providing support to organisations that are preparing to adopt various data centre standards. Finally, he's also the technical director of the National Data Centre Academy, which hopes to provide practical technical training to the data centre community in the near future. A lot of data centre there. Floor is yours.
I have sat on EU committees and UK committees, and when they talk about data centres, they say coal-eating, fire-breathing dragons, which is actually not the case. So here's a quick question for you. Anybody got a clue as to how much energy is used in the UK for data centres? Well, you'd be right, because we don't actually know. What we do know is that the commercial data centre sector, which is covered under something called the Climate Change Agreement for Data Centres, reported in September 2017 2.579 terawatt hours, which is actually 0.76% of total UK generation. So it's actually looking like it's near the 1% global, if you look at it on a country-by-country basis. In that year, the total UK generation was 339 terawatt hours, which is 0.285% of primary energy, which is coal and gas. It's the primary fuel stock that goes into the power stations, which was 2339 terawatt hours. So that's all good, yeah? 1%, 0.76%? No, not really, because it excludes BT, which in the previous carbon reduction commitment table was third after the Ministry of Defence and Tesco, and it excludes all private data centres and server rooms, right? Because it's only the commercial operators that are reporting that figure. So we did some research. So we worked out that there are 33,000 businesses in the UK that employ more than 250 people and 7,000 that employ more than 250 people. And we assumed that they would have a server room of some description, either a data center or a cooled server room. And then we doubled it for all the government IT. So government data centers and schools, colleges, blue light, and other remote and distributed IT architecture. 80,000 server rooms at an average energy cost of 57k per annum. And that's based on 50 items of equipment at commercial energy rates in 2017. 38.54 terawatt hours. Add the CCA to it, 41 terawatt hours, or 12% of UK generation. And I spoke to Emma Fry from Tech UK about this figure, and she did not say it was completely wrong. And there's a good reason for that. In the third period, which unfortunately was hit by pandemic, Tech UK did not publish their usual guidance on the climate change agreement. They just had a small item on their website, and I found it. Sector performs well against its third milestone. Provisional results indicate that it's met its efficiency target. Collectively, UK operators performed so well, they fulfilled the final scheme target 2 years ahead of schedule. However, at individual facility level, the picture is more mixed, and they'll be working to hard it. Climate change agreement ends in 2023. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with UK energy policy moving forward and whether or not the data centre sector will get an exemption or a new climate change agreement. Because effectively, if they've got a climate change agreement, they get a reduction off the climate change levy of, I think, 7% or something like that. So they can actually make sufficient money on this. But that money is supposed to be used for energy efficiency improvements within the facility. Some of them haven't been doing. But anyway, the final part was, whilst the commercial sector is heavily scrutinised, we still need to tackle the lingering problem of distributed IT. And distributed IT in their parlance is BT and all the enterprise and server rooms that are not included in the climate change agreement, which accounts for 11%. There are 89 organisations in the scheme, representing probably about 150 commercial operating data centres, but that's actually probably only 2/3 of the actual commercial operating data centres, because there are some companies that didn't get a chance to participate in the scheme. 48 did not meet their target. So over half the data centres involved in the climate change agreement did not meet their target. And what that meant was they had to go out and buy carbon offsets. And I'll come on to that later, perhaps, I think. So in the EU, the Code of Conduct was created because data centre energy demands in 2007 were 56 terawatt hours across all of the member states at that time. And it was forecast that in 2020, it would be 104 terawatt hours, which would be a problem for environmental policymakers, a problem for the energy bill payer, and a compelling motive to optimise energy efficiency. So, getting back to what we said earlier, over 11%, what do we think the global data centre consumption is based on what I've just said about the UK? No? Okay. So this was a recent article in the Science magazine, and it said that assessing the implications of growing demand for data centres requires robust understanding of the scale and drivers of the market, which has eluded many policymakers and energy analysts. We know this because of what the results from the CCA indicate. The reason for this is historical lack of bottom-up information on data centre types, locations, their IT equipment, and their energy efficiency trends. This has led to sporadic and often contradictory literature on global data centre energy use. Now, bearing in mind that policymakers use reports and analysis to determine how they move forward, and if the analysis is wrong, then obviously the policy is going to be wrong. You can find that in that Science mag. So that article actually said that in 2010, it was 1.1 to 1.5 estimated. And then when they went back to it, it was 1% when they did some historical revision in 2018. Again, that's in the Science magazine. But they said that there is a 4-fold increase in data centre construction projects scheduled, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But there needed to be policy support for energy efficiency on standards on IT equipment, investment in new types of technologies, and a lot more public data and monitoring. You'll be pleased to learn that, although we're not part of the EU anymore, policy support has been implemented in the Lot 9 regulations, and the recent Fit for 55 proposals have mandated a permanent data centre registry in all member states. It's just a proposal, so we'll see where it goes from there. I'm basically saying we're entering a critical transition phase, ensure low carbon energy efficient future. We cannot wait another decade for reliable estimates, especially in transitioning countries. So like, for instance, India, Latin America. There is a problem with power anyway, but we'll come on to that later. So, where is all this coming from? As I said earlier, $500 billion investment in data centres globally in the next 4 years. And where's this coming from? Why are we doing it? Well, in some cases, it's because of a lack of footprint. Okay? So there are more data centers in London than there are in the whole of India. Right? And India is expanding big time. They've only got about 600 megawatts of actual data center provision. In 4 years' time, they hope to have about 2 gigawatts. That's a fourfold increase just in India for data center construction. If you look, you'll see there's data centers springing up all over Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Mumbai. Secondly is the FANGs, right? So the FANGs are Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, right? And then we've got the cloud, right? So Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft, right? So these are driving the growth of data centers. The two, Amazon and Microsoft, because of the availability zones, so they're pushing into countries where there are very few cloud services and basically building data centers. And finally, speculation, right? It is now considered an asset class, like a shopping mall, right? There is a lot of money going into construction of data centers that really should keep its big snotty nose out, right? Because they are just looking for financial return. But why are they speculating? Because the FANGs can't build enough footprint themselves. So they're actually using co-location facilities and putting something in called metro hubs, right? And these people are thinking they'll build a data center and then they'll attract a Microsoft, an Amazon, or a Google to come and take space in their facility. Now, some of this use is frivolous, right? So I can't remember when I was a kid taking a photograph of my Sunday dinner and then taking it to the pub in the evening and showing all my mates and saying, well, look, I had a nice roast chicken earlier, but people do it on Facebook. People put pictures of dancing cats on Facebook, right? And with no kind of even concept of how much energy that's taking up, which they're not directly paying for. Netflix, as I said, streaming services. Some of the older generation may recognize Cloud-Based 9 from Captain Scarlet and the Mistrons, but it's there to talk about cloud. And then finally, we've got what happens in an internet minute, right? And we're going to go look at that in more detail in a second, but what we're going to do is look at the transition, right? So YouTube, 4.3 million videos were watched every minute in 2018. And in 2019, it was 4.5 million videos watched per minute. And in 2021, and remember this is during pandemic, 500 hours of content was uploaded to YouTube every minute. Right? And as we know, if your users are using all of these services, then they're using them, they're accessing them on devices, mobile phone networks, computers, VoIP systems, mobile telephony, switches, underground infrastructure, eventually leading up into the data center. Right? Right, so, I'm going to roll back a bit. One of my colleagues in the BCS Green IT group, he retired recently. He was a distinguished engineer for IBM. And he bought himself a piece of woodland in Wales. And he had some trees. And he wanted to maintain the health of it because he was only going up there once a month. So he developed something called the Internet of Trees. And that's a different story, so you can find that out. I think there's a BCS YouTube on it. But during his research, he found out that before the 1990s, there were 6 fundamental elements from the periodic table used in compute. Right? And you know, the usual suspects. Between 1990 and 2005, another 8 were added. And now, it's not, you can't see it very well, but over half the periodic table is used to manufacture ICT equipment. These are your Gorilla glasses, your mobile phones, and all that. And that the resource extraction, just to get those rare earths and minerals, has a massive environmental impact. But that's a story for another day. Maybe at the next lecture, Melissa, or lecture after that. We're not going to talk about that today. I just wanted to highlight it. We're going to talk about data center sustainability now. So there is a climate emergency, right? It's really here, it's really now. And we know this because of the fires that have happened in California and in Greece. The highest ever temperature recorded in Europe, in Sicily, a couple of months ago, 49 degrees. My wife struggles at 30. Not going to be able to do it at 49. You'll have to be covered in a big cloak. And flooding in London, that was a Pudding Mill, but we had flooding in Knightsbridge only 2 days ago, right? And this is all caused by climate change. And this is a flood map of 2030 for London, right? This is what they expect to happen without mitigation activities going on. So the climate emergency is here and it's right now. So what are we doing about it in the data center industry? Precious little, I would say. But sustainability is defined as developing now to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we're extracting all of these rare earths from the ground to make IT equipment, and we're possibly not giving them the ability to do the same thing moving forward. The UN have published a document that extends this definition to 17 specific goals. You can find out from them on SDGs, I think. And here they are, 18 of them, 17 of them. And you'll see that some data centers will cite these on their websites. But it's not consistent, and not everybody does it. And this is something that we've added to the Data Center Alliance's Sustainability White Paper. And the iMasons, the infrastructure masons, have also included it in a sustainability framework. And it's quite important that we kind of look at that. Now, in order to meet the net zero goals of government around the world, 10 things need to happen, right? Phase out coal plants, which is happening. There's no coal plants in the UK apart from a couple that are put on standby. And actually, after the recent problems with energy, they have actually fired up a coal-fired plant, which has got 10% efficiency. And the reason it's been fired up is because the wholesale price of electricity is over £1,000 a megawatt from its base of about 40. And to give you an example of that, Hinkley C strike price is £92 per megawatt. Right? So the power's gone up by a factor of 10. We need to invest in clean energy and efficiency. The UK government is doing that. More wind, more solar. It's not great, but it's still there. We need to retrofit buildings. We need to decarbonise cement, steel and plastics industries, which is kind of happening in the background. Shift to electric vehicles. We're doing that now. Increase in public transportation. Decarbonise aviation and shipping. Work is being done in the background to do that. Halt deforestation and restore degraded lands. I don't see a lot of progress on that. Need to reduce food waste and waste, and we need to eat more plants and less meat. And these are quite alarming things for people of a certain generation. You know, everything that we've kind of grown up with is disappearing. Interestingly, for buildings, the World Green Building Council says that all new buildings by 2030 need to operate at net zero carbon, which means they need to generate as much as they use or offset. All buildings by 2050 need to be doing the same thing. That is 29 years away. This is 9 years away, right? Now, to give you an example of data center scale, so does anybody recognize this building? Ex-BTers? Okay, so this is the Monument Telephone Exchange in the City of London. It's just literally around the corner from the Tower of London. And it's where I used to work when I was a youth, when I started BT in 1981. And it's a huge building. You know, it goes back quite a long way, and it was filled with electromechanical equipment, the old Straugers. Some floors had crossbar exchanges, and there was a TXE4 in there as well. And that is the central communications hub for Lloyd's of London and all of the surrounding businesses. Right? Huge, great facility. This is Facebook at Luleå in northern Sweden. That circle is where Monument Telephone Exchange would fit into it, right? So these are huge, great facilities, and that's just phase one. Is it from a different angle? That's been finished, and you can see they started building at the top end, right? So up here is up there. So these buildings are literally sit on hectares of land. You know, and if you were living in a nice rural part of Ireland, for instance, and somebody put a proposal in to build one of them, how would you feel? You'd miss out on your nice view of the mountains, and then you'd get this, once it was built, you'd start getting this low hum of the electrical infrastructure probably occurring. Irish High Court challenge over Apple Galway data centre planning extension. Right? The people are revolting. Residents protest against Google data centre in Israel. The Dutch province of Flevoland enforces a temporary data centre moratorium. People are revolting. They don't want, people are revolting anyway, but people are revolting. They don't want data centres to be built in their neighbourhoods. But yet they're quite happy to use the services that data centres provide. I love good neighbours. Recently, this week, last week, September the 27th, Irish Social Democrats to motion for data centre moratorium. Halt to developments while government works out a roadmap for sustainable development. And this was mentioned in the article that Melissa wrote. This was a spat between the regional council and the local council about building quite a large data centre. And that spat's still going on in the background, but they've been given permission to proceed at their own risk. Now, if you're building something like that, which is 100 million euros, dollars, pounds, full stop, are you going to proceed at your own risk? No, of course you're not. So it is a bit like the Wild West out there, right? We've got the speculators that are going in, buying up land, doing stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then the sheriffs are coming into town. And the sheriffs are the local planning authorities and various government departments. And they're basically saying, no, you can't do that. But they really are in a tight spot because they want to accelerate the digital skills agenda and give everybody access to broadband and the services of the internet. But at the same time, they don't want individual spats cropping up where buildings are being built. So what is sustainability in a data center context? And we did a sustainability benchmarking exercise for a client earlier this year. And we looked everywhere. You stretched all my contacts across the globe, and there is no global definition of what a sustainable data center looks like, which is probably bad for us in the standards community because we should have sorted that out. But actually, I think there is. So there's the EU Code of Conduct for Data Centers. There's the EN 5600 Technical Report 99-1, Best Practices for Energy Efficiency, which is in effect a standard format of the Code of Conduct. There's Best Practices for Sustainability. And then there's the ISO 30134 series of data center KPIs, which is power utilization effectiveness, water utilization effectiveness, and other metrics, which have been out now for about 4 years, and most data centers only report one of them. In 2019, Susanna Cass, who was mentioned in your article, actually, Melissa, I believe, you spoke to Susanna, she published this document called Designing and Building the Next Generation of Data Centers and issued a call to action. Unfortunately, that call has fallen on deaf ears. We must rethink how we design, build, and operate next-generation data centers and include the sustainability cost of ownership, economic, resource impact, and societal benefits. And defines the data center as this: sustainability at its core, uses renewable energy, it does this while maintaining 99% uptime, etc., etc. But the current designs, which are kind of like this is if you go to any fairly modern data center, this is the kind of layout you'll see. This is actually Cyrus 1, who are building some stuff in the Netherlands. So power side, A and B, cooling, data hall. This design does not fulfill that brief. And yet this design is what you will see in every planning application throughout the world. Now, the Fiesta. Now, we live quite close. We live in Warwick, so I'm not very far away from here. And I did an assessment of the IBM Midlands recovery site at Warwick that was built in 1977 when I was 13. And then recently I went down to Farnborough Business Park and looked at some of the ARC, or Datum Data Centre, which is on that selection, and that's only fairly new. You know, I could have snapped my fingers and moved between the two of them, and I wouldn't really know the difference. This is a 1977 Fiesta. And this is the 1921 Fiesta. Okay? Look at the difference. That's 40 years of improvements, continual improvements by the automotive industry. Now, you could argue that it's just a car. Yeah? It's got wheels, it's got a cabin, it's got seats, it's got an engine. But I would say that the 2021 edition has been optimized for airflow. Yeah? It probably handles better. The engine is better and more efficient. It's got better in-car entertainment, and it can provide you with more information. Difference being is that that one there was about £1,856 when it was first launched, and this one here is 16,000. But that's showing the progression of the automotive industry. We've gone from something that people would consider to be fairly basic to something that's actually quite sophisticated. The data center industry hasn't done that. It's still doing what it was doing back in 1977, with some exceptions on cooling. But the inherent base design is exactly the same as it was in 1977. So as I said to them on a number of presentations, it's time for radical rethink. We really need to think about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And as I said in the article, we've got hipsters versus MPS, or male, pale and style, and I apologise in advance, because quite a few of you could fall into that category, but I'm sure you're all innovative and right on the money. But this is what we've got a problem with, is that a lot of the people that are in senior positions in data center companies, which is actually quite a relatively new industry, 20 years old probably, are male, stale and pale. And they're building what they're used to building. Yeah, they don't want to change things, because the whole of the structure of financing, building and operating a data center hasn't changed for 40 odd years. They see it as somebody else's problem, because most of them are close to retirement. And they don't want to get involved in quite major changes to infrastructure projects, especially with some of the false premises that customers put on data center providers. So one of the things that they could use is the Code of Conduct for Data Centers, which is 160 best practices, and I'll actually, later on this afternoon, I'll be sitting on the annual best practice committee. And one of them that's quite interesting, one of the best practices is 3.2.4, which is life cycle analysis. And what that means is you do an in-depth study of all of the embodied carbon and operational carbon in every component inside your facility and add it all up. There's another presentation I'm doing as well, which talks about the historical carbon, but we'll talk about that later. And then there's some new best practices in 10 and 11. Talking about Technical Report 99.2, it talks about sustainability in this sense and says the electrical and mechanical equipment and IT equipment dominate the embodied environmental impact of data centers 2 to 3 orders of magnitude greater than the construction phase. If you recall that Facebook site, the construction carbon there is absolutely huge, and the mechanical, electrical, and IT is 3 times bigger than that. Right? So these are huge, huge problems in sustainability moving forward. And we're talking about environmental assessment buildings for BREEAM and LEED. So BREEAM, British Research Establishment's Environmental Assessment Method, and LEED, the Leadership in Energy and Efficiency Design in the States, which a lot of data centers are certified to. Why? I don't really know, but that's what they think they need to do. And these are limited because they don't consider that part of the equation. They don't consider the electromechanical equipment and the IT equipment in the assessment. You could build it, not put anything in it, and it would still get quite a high mark. Now, the 99-2 document says that you don't need to do an LCA, but it says if you want to do it, you can use these standards. In the Code of Conduct, however, life cycle assessment will be mandatory from hopefully from this afternoon. I have to say that 99.2 is probably due for an update because it is about 4 years old, so it will probably ask for a life cycle assessment in that one moving forward. Has anybody heard about GHG scopes? Okay, so greenhouse gas protocol is kind of like a de facto standard, and you'll find that a lot of companies are reporting their Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. So in a data center context, a Scope 1 is directly any energy you use on your own site. So backup generator fuel, you would report as Scope 1. Scope 2, purchased electricity, and that's your incoming power bill, you'd have to report Scope 2. Scope 3 is where the problem is, because Scope 3 is everything else, both upstream of you and downstream of you, right? And the industry is in a flat spin about this because none of the supporting infrastructure companies are providing the information they need to do their Scope 3. But they will be, because the Code of Conduct is going to force them into it. But they should be doing it anyway, because themselves as a manufacturing entity, they have to report it to whoever they need to report it to. This is the system boundary for 99.2. See, everything's in there. System boundary, like extraction of raw materials, transport, manufacturing, refresh, materials and energy, transportation, the emissions that you're doing into the compute and all that sort of stuff. And as I said earlier, total life cycle emissions, design and construction is about 1 to 4% of your overall carbon emissions, which happens in 1 to 2 years. And this is design phase up to when you switch it on. All Scope 3. M&E fit out, around 4%, 20 to 25 years, Scope 3. IT fit out, 12%, 3 to 5 years, 3 years. Ops, 80% of your carbon emissions will come from operations, and it can be 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, decommission marginal. I'm going to flick through these, but there's construction materials for EPDs. So EPDs is an environmental product declaration, and all items, even, this can have an EPD. But there is a specific standard for construction materials. But these are the type of things they're looking at. Global warming potential, water depletion, water pollution, air pollution, etc. This is expensive to do. Right? This can take a week per product. Concrete I'm not too worried about because the concrete industry are doing quite a lot of work on decarbonisation. But I will show you something that I found quite amusing. So in the Netherlands, they reduced the amount of concrete required by building a slab using rebar, and then they put plastic, very thick plastic balls in there. So they take up a certain amount of volume, and then when you put the concrete in, clearly you don't need to put as much concrete in because the ball is taking up the space. And what you do then is you build them up in slabs, and then you put them in. Now in the Netherlands, they built it, but they turned them around the wrong way, and the whole thing collapsed. But hopefully things have changed now, so they might have prevented that from moving forward. I'm not bothered about steel because most steel is recycled anyway, or recyclable. I actually spent some time at the British Steelworks in Scunthorpe and have seen scrap steel being pushed into the furnace. It's quite an amazing sight. But effectively, the entire supply chain for the data center industry is going to have to start producing EPDs, and some of your broadband equipment, actually, you might find has EPD information. And here it is. I did this on Saturday. I looked for it, and there is a sustainability assessment for network equipment for Global Electricity Council, EP, Ecolabel, and TUV Rhineland. You can find it on that link, and I think you'll be surprised exactly how much and how deep they're going into to find out what the environmental sustainability is of a core switch or a network switch or even a router. In terms of operations for data centers, follow the code of conduct management, think about procurement, EPDs, calculate all your ISOs, calculate your operational scope 3s. If you're an enterprise customer, try and get into an accredited co-location site that is accredited to various standards. If you are colo, then think about getting accredited because it will make a difference. Because your customers are going to end up looking for GHG and carbon, and they will seek to push that onus onto you. You need to think about that. As part of our sustainability exercise we did earlier this year, we created this wheel, certifications and compliance. As you can see, we've got LEED, BREEAM, ISO 50001. Anybody know what that is? Energy management systems. ISO 14001, environmental management systems. The data center best practices and KPIs, and then finally the UN SDGs. Effectively, this wheel says if you're fully coloured, then you're probably being as sustainable as it's possible to be right now. Of the 8 companies we checked, none of them were fully coloured in. Quick look at EU data centre policy. So kite marks, the code of conduct for data centres. So this is lot 9, which I referred to when I was talking about the Science magazine, the energy efficiency measures on IT equipment. It's all in lot 9. Code of conduct for data centres, best practices, and then their Horizon 20 research projects, but they've also just published those Fit for 55 proposals, which there are some nasty things lurking in the energy efficiency directives, which push stuff back onto the data centres. And something new this year is the Climate Neutral Data Centre Pact. Some of your clients may have signed up to it, and those signatories have to abide by 6 principles. So one is energy efficiency, second is clean energy, third is water use, fourth is the circular economy. So this is bringing old kit back into use by either selling it to third parties for refurbishment and around that way. Circular energy system, heat reuse, and then governance. Now, I was on a call with them last week, and we're going to make it mandatory for them to sign up to the code. So some companies will need to map those items onto the KPIs. So the general one for KPI indicators is -1. That tells you how to create a KPI. For energy efficiency, they need to be showing their PUE effectiveness to that standard, -2. And potentially in the future, they might be looking at clean energy. So this is how much the renewable energy they're using. But what you'll see is there are 3 basic principles for energy efficiency for any product, any service. And it's, first of all, it's reduce the amount of energy you're consuming to provide that service. Then you optimize the amount of energy you're using for that service. And finally, you go to renewable energy. What the data center companies are doing is they're missing the first 2 and jumping straight to renewable energy. You'll see loads of articles saying, we're 50%, we're 100% powered by renewable energy, even though they're getting their grid from the coal-fired power station down the road. They've actually bought green electricity from elsewhere. My argument to them is an inefficient data center powered by renewable energy is still an inefficient data center. And they don't like that, but I don't care. But they should be reporting the renewable energy factor, which is the percentage of renewable energy they're using in their operations. Moving forward, there is two other metrics, which is the data center IT energy efficiency for servers and the utilization for servers. They're not directly into the clean energy, they're probably more in the energy efficiency part, but I'll hold that space for a moment. In terms of circular energy system, which is energy waste heat reuse, we've got the energy reuse factor, -6. Clean energy could be used for carbon usage effectiveness, which is -8. And water will definitely fall into the water utilization effectiveness. Anybody notice one missing? -7, which is cooling efficiency ratio. It's actually more an American standard, but somebody put it in anyway. But that's not been published yet, still under consultation. In the UK, and I'm sure some of you are probably not aware of this, but you might be, the Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme comes around every 4 years. Anybody had to do one? No? Okay. So currently it's energy identification. Oh look, there's an opportunity there to save energy, but you're not actually compelled to do it. There's no compulsion to do it. Then we've got the streamlined energy and carbon reporting. Now this has got some teeth, and I'll cover that in the next slide. The EU ETS emissions trading system that all data center operators and large energy users have to comply with has just been called the UK emissions trading system, and there'll be work done on that moving forward. And if you do any work with the public sector, you may have come across Public Procurement Notice June 21, which asks for a mandatory carbon reduction plan in your tender documentation. Now, whether or not that plan will be looked at by anybody who knows what they're talking about is completely a moot point. On to Seeker. So let me know if you need a copy of Seeker. I can send you where the link is. But it's got some real teeth, real teeth. All organisations should report the following: the tonnes of CO2 equivalent per total per millions of sales revenue, totals of CO2 per total EBITDA, and then your tonnes of CO2 per full-time equivalents. Seeker only applies to 250 people and above, or 43 million in assets and 50 million in turnover. So a lot of companies will fall under that threshold, but these are the big guys. So BT will need to be reporting this, Sky will be reporting this, all of those content delivery network guys will be reporting this. And here is the kicker. Telecoms, internet software and services companies need to report. What do you think they need to report? You're not going to like it. You're really not going to like it. Tons of CO2 per gigabyte transmitted. Right? Now that came into force in 2020, April 2020. Obviously, we went into lockdown in March, so not many companies have reported this yet, and I think that the Environment Agency and BEIS will kind of say, you've got some grace, but they will start looking at that. Now, it just so happens that I was at a meeting last week, and I was sitting next to a chap called Lord Rupert Resdale, right? And he runs an organisation called the Energy Managers Association. And I mentioned Seeker to the group, and his head went down, because I mentioned that figure. And he said, yeah, that's me. I put that in. It's a mistake. They put forward a draft, and then it all went quiet. And then it appeared. This was supposed to go out for further consultation to all of the industry sectors. It didn't happen, and it's just now been published, and now it's in law. Right? I don't know how this will play out. I'm sure that there will be somebody somewhere who will go, no, we can't do that. Because can you imagine measuring that? How would you measure it? And if you're between two companies, do you count outbound of one data center to the inbound of another? It's the same piece of data. How can you measure the energy consumption twice? Only a few more slides. So, if you can't see the wood for the trees, you need some help, call JB. That's me, not James, but it's topical. I thought I'd put it in. And these are the sort of services that we do. So we do data center energy efficiency and sustainability assessments. My good lady wife is a quality and environmental management systems lead auditor. I'm a disaster recovery and energy management lead auditor. I'm an ESOS lead auditor for the present. We do sustainability benchmarking. We do some training. We can do life cycle analysis. I'm signed up to do the BREEAM assessment. We can kind of turn a hand at anything data center-y, energy efficiency, kind of just ask the question. Some tips for you. If you are in a data center, formally participate in the code of conduct, undertake some assessments, consider certifying to 50001, which is the energy management system, and that can exempt you from ESOS and may exempt you from some seeker stuff as well. If you're going to do that, get somebody on your team registered as an ESOS lead auditor. I've seen ESOS assessments charged out at 10, 20, 30 grand. The training to be a lead auditor costs about 2. So, and they can sign off. So it's probably better to do it that way. Get an external review, perhaps some sustainability benchmarking, get some training, consider the certified energy efficiency for you, the data center award, which is based on the code of conduct, or DCA certification, which is based on the EN 5600. And now, if you sign up to the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, you'll be formally participating in the code of conduct anyway. So, in sustainability, in essence, sustainable DCs need to renew energy sources, reuse materials, perpetuate their life cycles, remanufacture bioproducts, reduce landfill impact, and the sustainable data center needs to benefit the environment. I think we're a long way off, but thank you. Oh, by the way, I've been nominated for the DCS Awards, Outstanding Participation Contribution to Energy Efficiency and Sustainability. The vote, which is on there, it's on in a couple of weeks' time. It would be nice for you to vote for me if you think that I'm worthy of it. So, questions and answers? Yeah.
Trying one. Yeah, all right. Yeah. So you said that since 1977, data centers have no innovate really, like they are the same as they were before, but the services are becoming more and more important. So are you saying that the only thing that they've done to overcome with the increase of the services is just make the things bigger and that's it, or?
I think there's a lot of things we need to do. So first of all, we need to think about the power side of things. So currently we're using energy which we generate in power stations with quite a low efficiency. We then transform it, therefore we lose energy. We put it onto high tension lines. We drag it down to substations where another transformer, we lose efficiency. We take it to the center of the data center, another transformer, lose efficiency. Take it into the UPS, lose efficiency. We'll lose 30% of the delivered energy to that. And then when we get into the server itself, where are the heat sources on a server or a piece of networking equipment? It's the chips and the power supply unit, which transform it from 240 AC down to the microvolts needed on a system board. Right? So to me, that is a one big long power chain that we need to look at in a lot more detail. Because if the board is only using 12 volts DC, why are we feeding it 240 volts AC? If we did manage that part of it, we reduce heat. And if we reduce heat, then we reduce the need to cool, which means we've got another big chunk of saving. That's the innovation I'm talking about, and that's not happening. And it's not happening because the likes of the FANGs are giving their builders 20th century design specs and saying, build that. And that design spec is really, really wide. And for data centers, we can be really, really narrow. Facebook, OCP project, they've eliminated UPSs in their designs. So what they do is they put a really small capacitor on each system board. And if it goes down, it goes down. Because they'll just pull it out and put a new one in.
So yeah, we have to think about what we're doing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello. You hear a lot about data centers being built north of the Arctic Circle, and Microsoft even building one underwater. Now, obviously, these save on cooling energy, but does it make them more sustainable?
Good question. Right, so first of all, the Microsoft's underwater data center is a pure gimmick, right? It should have been there for 5 years. They had to drag it out after 2, right? And it didn't fulfill. They've all gone really quiet on it as well, right? So if there was something to shout about, I'm sure they'd be going, well, hey, our underwater data center's doing really good. But no, not all gone. In terms of building above the Arctic Circle, I've actually been there. It was minus 37. Right? I mean, then that's just too cold. They actually need to use the waste heat to temper the heat, the air coming in, right? And they'll tell you it's a good thing, but I think the jury's still out. If you've got a pristine pine forest and you start digging it up and putting a concrete and stuff data center, and you're affecting the microclimate, you have to be, because you're changing the natural characteristics. So I don't think it's very sustainable. The thing is, you've got to look at it in balance. Renewable energy from hydro, which, you know, they've got plenty of hydro up there, plenty. It reduces their operating costs. So, and that's all they care about, is to reduce their operating costs. The other thing that I think sometimes they don't consider is, we actually did some work for a company called Bulk Infrastructure that built a brand new data center in Kristiansand. And they have trouble staffing it, because Norway's only got 5.5 million people. There's probably only a community of about 50,000 people that are data center aware, and they've all got jobs. So you have to start importing labor or creating your own. And the data center has got a huge skills crisis at the moment. You know, they think that by 2025 there'll be 2.2 million jobs available in data center, or 300,000 is globally. After I did my presentation to the Indian Confederation, I thought I'd have a quick look to see how many jobs were open in India. There were 10,500 data center jobs in India. Look in the UK, there's probably 2,000 to 3,000. Across Europe, there's probably another 20,000. Right? So that, you know, this, and I think it's interesting. If you go and speak to somebody at an event like this and say, or a data center event, you say to them, "How did you get into data centers? What's your background?" My very good friend, Mark, right, he's a mining engineer. He did his degree in geology. And yet he's one of the premier European spokespeople for the data centers. It's as far away from mining as you can get. What you'll find is that most people have fallen into the industry from other trades. So if you're an electrician or a mechanical engineer or an IT person, you've quite happily done what you needed to do. And then this job's come up, shift engineer in a data center, you know, 20, 30% more than you're getting at the moment. Off you going. So, but in Norway, I mean, I've been to Norway, and I'm telling you, right, it is not for everybody. I mean, it's a great lifestyle, don't get it wrong, but in the summer, you get 3 hours of darkness, and you really can't sleep. And in the winter, you get 4 hours of daylight. Right? And I've actually seen people, and my wife will remember this, Hannah in Kristiansand, well, we're actually in Oslo. There was a tiny strip, and she was here like that to the sun. And I said, "Hannah, you're right." She went, "John, in 2 weeks' time, I will not see the sun for 6 months." Right? And it is difficult, you know, to get people, and they are still recruiting people. It's been open for 2 years. Any other questions?
What's your take on cryptocurrency?
These guys are prolific, right? And they're all over the, you know, China's just shut them down, right, completely, which will be interesting to see how it pans out. there are crypto miners in the States that are hitched up to disused gas-fired power stations. There's one that's planning to use some nuclear stuff, right? And let's define this, right? So you've got the cryptocurrencies on one side, and then you've got your blockchain on the other, right? Blockchain is good because blockchain means that data can't be manipulated, right? And crypto is the manifestation of blockchain. It's the mining of it, but blockchain is good stuff. If you were to compare crypto mining energy consumption with conventional finance energy consumption, I think you'll find that Bitcoin would be quite small, but it's growing. And a lot of companies are looking at Bitcoin. Federal agencies are looking at it, some banks are looking at it. But I think they're actually more looking at the blockchain side of that, apart from the mining side of it. But I would close every crypto mine down tomorrow, because I think they serve no useful purpose. It's highly speculative. And I'm sure people have made a lot of money out of it, but the people that I see that are promoting it are the ones that have bought and now want to get rid. It's just a pump and dump stuff, I think. Okay, any other questions? Oh, okay. Well, thank you for your time. You can contact us on that if you've got any queries or anything. Thank you all for listening to my ramblings on sustainability.